like every reader has fallen into a reading slump at some point or another. You start a book, but you just can't seem to finish it. You're feeling too worn down or burnt out, and the current book that you're reading just leaves you feeling exhausted. I have fallen into many reading slumps in my lifetime, even recently, but I don't want that to be you. I'm gonna be recommending a bunch of books that you won't be able to put down. These are books that are very fast-paced, they're binge-worthy. Think of these as your lifeline that will pull you out of that slump when you're feeling burnt out. If you're looking for some fantasy or sci-fi recommendations to binge, I'm gonna be giving you a whole bunch of them, and I think I might actually make a part 2 to this video as well, or even make it a series on the channel, where I'll recommend more binge-worthy reads. Before getting into it, you might need some caffeine if you're gonna be binge reading, and we have been blessed by a sponsor. This video is sponsored by Atlas Coffee Club. I don't know about you, but I need my coffee in the morning, and with Atlas Coffee Club, every sip takes you to a new destination. This is like my 3rd cup today. I should probably slow down. They're a coffee subscription service that curates the top 1% of the world's best single origin coffee, roasted and ground to your preference and delivered freshly to your door. Atlas Coffee Club sources from over 50 countries, Tanzania, Kenya, Colombia, and beyond. So you'll get a taste of a different country every month. Now, I really appreciate the customization. You can be sent whole bean, ground, or coffee pods. I typically just pour over my coffee, but I do want to get a grinder at some point, so it's nice to know I have the option. Now, this month, they sent me 3 bags of 12-ounce coffee. They sent me 2 from Peru and 1 from Tanzania. I really love the design of their packaging and how each country has its own style. I also love how they give you a postcard from that country along with a flavor notes card, and this even mentions the history of coffee in that country. My favorite has to be the coffee from Peru. Now, this is a dark roast coffee, and it says the tasting notes are Asian pear, baking spice, and white chocolate. I can confirm it's a really good cup of coffee, like really good. It's also great to know that it's all sustainably sourced and they pay above the fair trade price on all their coffee. Now, Atlas Coffee Club is offering my viewers 50% off plus free shipping on your first month of coffee using the code CAPTUREDINWORDS, or you can go to atlascoffee.com/capturedinwords. Make sure to check the link in the description, and thank you to Atlas Coffee Club for sponsoring the video. Okay, the first book or series I'm going to be recommending is the one that recently pulled me out of a reading slump. I am so grateful for that, and that is Red Rising by Pierce Brown. This is almost aggressively unputdownable. These books have an unrelenting tempo. It's almost difficult not to read them so fast, at least once you get past the first, like, 60 pages or so. That's the basic setup of the novel. Set in a future where mankind has spread throughout the solar system, society is split into a color-based class system, with each color evolving physically and mentally according to the role that they play in society. The arrogant, godlike golds are the ones who rule supreme, and reds occupy the lowest level and are the manual laborers. And we follow Darrow, a member of the oppressed red class who's working as a miner on Mars, mining helium-3 to terraform the planet and make it livable for the golds and the rest of humanity. Now, Darrow ends up getting involved in a plot to overturn this corrupt system from the inside out by bringing about revolution, all the while learning that things aren't always as black and white as he believed them to be. Right from book 1, the narrative is relentless. It is filled with political intrigue, brutal battles, and just a really fascinating dystopian world. I found it so interesting learning about this society and the subtle control methods that they use, and seeing how individuals from each color interact with each other. Now, this is sci-fi, but as a die-hard fantasy nerd, it hit all the right notes for me. It sounds kind of similar to the Hunger Games, but this is not young adult. It doesn't use those familiar young adult tropes at all. This is one of those books where once it gets going, it does not let you go with its incredible fast pace, while still keeping up some great character moments and deep themes that you're going to be thinking about. Now, I know there's a TV series that's in the works, and I feel like this has so much potential. I'm just really hoping that they get it right, because these books truly blew my mind. The plot's going to amaze you in so many different ways constantly, and I can't believe it took me so long to read it, despite all of you recommending Red Rising to me for a long time. Also, the audiobooks are fantastic and worth checking out if you prefer audio. I might be making some more videos on Red Rising very soon. Now, my next recommendation has some significant Red Rising vibes to it, so if you liked that one, then there's a good chance you're going to like this as well. Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter. This is an African-inspired fantasy revenge story that is like a steam train of action. Every single chapter is intense, and there's rarely a break. I would say it's sort of like Game of Thrones meets Gladiator. The Omehi people have been fighting an unwinnable fight for almost 200 years. Their society has been built around war and only war. The lucky ones are born gifted. 1 in every 2,000 women has the power to call down dragons. 1 in every 100 men is able to magically transform himself into a bigger, stronger, faster, killing machine. Everyone else is fodder, destined to fight and die in the endless war. Young, giftless Tao knows all this, but he has a plan of escape. He's going to get himself injured, get out early, and settle down to marriage, children, and land. Only, he doesn't get the chance. Those closest to him are brutally murdered, and his grief swiftly turns to anger. Fixated on revenge, Tao dedicates himself to an unthinkable path. He'll become the greatest swordsman to ever live. A man willing to die 100,000 times for the chance to kill the 3 who betrayed him. Tao is a character that over and over again, he's taking the difficult path, and you're right there with him. You're feeling his rage, and sometimes you might want him to chill a little bit, but then other times you also want him to just smash the entire system. And in most cases, he chooses rage. He chooses to Hulk smash. I've never read any African-inspired fantasy, so this felt very fresh to me. I loved the world building and the magic system based around this spiritual realm and how it cost a significant price to use the magic here. I found so interesting. Now, Winters also does a great job at handling these real world injustices in his book without it feeling like heavy-handed or anything. It feels very natural, and the way that he handles social hierarchy and how it affects people and dehumanizes people, I just thought was handled really well. Now, the plot twists and turns. As soon as I feel like it's gonna fall into some type of trope, it doesn't. It surprises me, and Winters does action scenes incredibly well. There's constant action. At times I wish there was a little bit of breathing room, but that is what makes the pacing so fast. The Rage of Dragons is one of the most action-packed and fast-paced books I have read in a good long while. Also, I would recommend the audiobook as well. The narrator is really good at capturing that pulse-pounding rage that permeates the book. I still need to get to the second book. I should read it soon. If you're looking for a gripping, page-turning, dystopian, grimdark fantasy, then look no further than The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. This was a recent read for me. I know everybody has talked about it. Kuang has created this Asian-inspired fantasy world that mirrors a lot of events that were happening in East Asia during World War II between China and Japan, with a splash of the Opium Wars and the Chinese Communist Revolution thrown in there. And the author is a Chinese scholar, so a lot of these historical events are mixed in there, and a lot of the stuff I didn't even know about, I ended up looking into it afterwards, and wow, there's a lot of horrible things that happened. But anyways, it was handled really well in this book, but it gets dark. It gets very dark. The story drops you into a military training academy following Rin, a bright orphan with a lot of talent. She's a war orphan, adopted to a horrible family, and the young girl faces discrimination at every turn. But she works hard to prove herself. Now, I enjoyed Rin's experience at the academy so much that I just kept turning the page. It was hard for me to put the book down, which obviously that's why it's a great binge read recommendation. I love how efficient Kuang's writing is. There's nothing unnecessary to the plot. There's nothing dragging it down. There's no boring, dull moments in between. It's just right to the point. I flew through this book. I still need to get to the next ones though, so I'm not sure if the entire series always keeps up this pace. Now, Rin is an unlikable protagonist, and that's okay. I feel like I don't believe that all protagonists need to be likable. In fact, it kind of makes them more believable when they're not. But yeah, even so, she does get a little annoying sometimes with how she keeps repeating the same mistakes over and over again, and her extremism can be a little frustrating sometimes. I mean, Rin seriously needs therapy, and because of all that, Rin's character is just not going to work with some readers. That's why I'm putting that warning out there, but that is kind of the point of her character as well. The Eastern-inspired world and magic are really interesting. The tribalism and the factions and the politics I all enjoyed. I also loved that everyone had a motive, and it wasn't just two color-coded sides that were squabbling over whatever. Now, you should know this book isn't for the faint of heart. There's a moment where the tone drastically shifts and it gets very, very dark and brutal. The way that Kwong handles war, she doesn't flinch from showing the horrors of war. It's brutal and it's brilliant in how realistic it is, but it can be a tough read for sure. It is a very engrossing book, and I want to start the second book very soon. Michael J. Sullivan's Riyria Revelations is a series that delivers a classic yet fresh take on fantasy, following the adventures of Royce and Hadrian, a skilled pair of thieves and mercenaries, and it's the chemistry between these two that make this such a high recommendation for me. They have such opposing personalities, but they're also complementary at the same time. Hadrian is this very optimistic hero, while Royce is sort of a pessimistic rogue. And the banter between them is second to none. They have one of my favorite friendships in fantasy, and it's one that gets better the further on you read, so by the end of the trilogy, you'll agree that it's one of the best bromances out there. Now, don't be intimidated by how thick these books are, because they're pretty easy to cruise through. They're filled with a lot of humor, adventure, mystery, vivid world building, not to mention there also is a lot of twists and turns and big reveals. And one thing that makes them so bingeable is that Sullivan's prose is just really accessible. The dialogue and narrative are very fast-paced, and in many ways, it's kind of this traditional fantasy world, with a lot of those classic elements, so it's easy to dive into. It's a really entertaining high fantasy. I'd even say it's pretty family-friendly for the most part, and I think it's a great recommendation for those that just want something light and entertaining, or are even new to the fantasy genre. Now, I'm not saying these books are basic by any means. Michael J. Sullivan is a very skillful writer and storyteller, and the dynamic between the two protagonists is going to make you want to keep reading. So if you're a fan of traditional fantasy with a more modern flair, this is for you. The Murderbot Diaries by Martha Wells. Now, the first 4 of these are novellas. You can read them in like a day or two. These novellas read really easy, but they're not necessarily an easy read. In Murderbot, you follow a security robot who's overcome the module controlling it and now has free will. And now that it has free will, it's trying to discover what happened on a previous assignment where it apparently massacred a bunch of people. Now, while Murderbot is a robot, the story is actually extremely human. A good chunk of the series is the protagonist self-reflecting, and this robot is very anxious and depressed, but the story is surprisingly lighthearted and heartfelt. Murderbot feels uncomfortable talking with humans, something I'm sure a lot of us can relate to, but at the same time, it's sort of obsessed with watching human soap operas. There's really a lot of depth and complexity to Murderbot. I really love this character, and the way that Martha Wells balances the development of Murderbot, I think is masterful. Now, there's a lot of humor in these as well that's balanced out with some more emotional moments. But most of this is about this robot's mental state and the mystery surrounding it. I wish some of the side characters had a little more depth to them, but they do make up for that in personality. Now, the novellas are self-contained. They should still be read in the correct order though, because there's things that do connect, but these are such fun reads. And they happen to have amazing audiobooks that are worth checking out. I say give All Systems Red a try, and if you enjoy it, you're going to enjoy the others because it just gets better. The Cradle Series by Will White. This is one of the most bingeable series that I've ever read. Well, I haven't read the entire series yet, there's like 11 books, but I've read enough of them at this point that I can come to that opinion. These are pretty short books that just race by, and with each one, things ramp up more and more. I would say that book 1 is actually the slowest, but it's not even really that slow. To be honest, there's times where I feel like it's a little too fast, where I want to learn more about the world instead of glossing over it. Now, the Cradle series. This is an Asian-inspired progression fantasy or power fantasy, and the main protagonist, Linden, goes through a lot of growth and becomes more powerful over the course of the books. It does a really good job at avoiding a lot of the pitfalls that many other progression fantasies have. And really, this is also inspired by the Chinese subgenres of wuxia and shensha, pardon my pronunciation. Basically, superhuman feats of martial arts and immortal heroes. We follow Linden, a really great underdog hero. Now, he's banned from learning the sacred arts because he is unsouled, meaning that he can't use his spirit to manipulate the Madra, making him the lowest rank among all of his peers. And Madra is this raw spiritual energy that powers up the magic system. It's basically pure spirit, there's different types of it, and people have different affinities to it. But Linden is unsouled, and he has been ridiculed his whole life, and treated almost like a cripple. He has to go through a lot just to survive in a community that is much more powerful than he is. But an event that happens changes his fate forever. Now, underdog stories are nothing new, but I tend to really enjoy them, and this one is really satisfying. I feel like it handles that trope very well. The magic system takes a lot of inspiration from Chinese spiritualism and martial arts, and there's magical artifacts and stuff. It's a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed learning about it. Now, I was a big fan of Naruto growing up, and this is the perfect recommendation for people that are fans of Naruto, or Hunter x Hunter, or other shonen. I feel like this is honestly the perfect, epic progression fantasy to get into if you like anime. Or even Avatar: The Last Airbender, you're likely gonna like the Cradle series. Cradle series is also free with Kindle Unlimited, and the author is often giving them away for free as well. So whether you're drawn to tales of rebellion on Mars, the brutal realities of war, the social anxiety of a self-aware robot, or the camaraderie of thieves, these binge read recommendations are going to keep you up late into the night, turning the next page to see what happens next. Let me know what you thought of the video. Leave me your recommendations in the comments as well, because I do want to make more episodes of binge read recommendations, so some of yours might end up in the next video. Anyways, huge thank you to all of my Patreons. You guys make these videos possible. I appreciate you all so much.